Well, there's 6 games on tap tonight in the NHL, and there's a couple of storylines we've been following. I'm Kate Pettersen, and with me is David Pagnotta, and this is the latest on the fourth period, presented by CCM Hockey. All right, Dave, every week we're talking about all sorts of different things, including some surprises, some predictions from the beginning of the season of teams who might be hot, and we've shuffled those around the last few weeks. And I want to start today with the Boston Bruins, not out to the start that they had hoped, but they're 8-3, hanging on to that wild card spot. And Don Sweeney's got to be looking around to see what he can do relative to not having very much cap space. So that might end up being a departure of a key piece of their roster. What do you think he's looking for? What's going on over there?
Yeah, Kate. I mean, obviously, it's not the start of the season that the Boston Bruins anticipated. They've been kind of sluggish and honestly just looking a little bit rough since training camp. This is extended since September. This isn't just a short term stretch that things have just completely fallen off for this club. Now, as you said, they're 8-3, so they're still in the thick of things come playoff mode. But if they continue this trend, some other teams are certainly going to be catching up right behind them, and that has them a little bit concerned. They haven't had the contributions from some of their depth guys like Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, Morgan Geekie, haven't really participated much offensively for this group. And that's a big problem for them. They didn't replace the 27 goals lost by Jake DeBrusk last season. Yeah, they brought in Elias Lindholm, but at the money he's making, even though he's a two-way guy, he hasn't contributed offensively. So Don Sweeney would certainly like to bring in somebody who's got some jam, but can also put the puck in the net. The only issue is, as you said, they don't have a ton of cap space, Kate. So it's going to take a little bit of creativity. Perhaps one of the guys I mentioned might have to be on the outs in order for them to make an impact type move. There's a little bit of concern that's starting to grow within management, and that could lead to some movement, which is likely why we're starting to hear them in the trade market over the last several days.
Well, we know what happened with Edmonton last year and where they ended up. Not the start once again that they were hoping for, but the last few games have been better. They're 3-1 in their last four, lost in overtime in Toronto, and then tonight they start a back-to-back. They're in Montreal. Then they play Ottawa tomorrow night to wrap things up in the East. So a chance to continue to gain some of that momentum. Do you think that they are looking to add? And if so, could there be a potential target on the ice that they can take a look at tonight in Montreal?
There might be. David Savard is in the lineup for the Montreal Canadiens, and he's going to be a target for a number of teams, including the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, I think the Oilers and Stan Bowman are looking around to see what their options are going to be later on in the season. They're last in the NHL right now on the PK. They want to certainly improve that element, but they're also cognizant of the time of year it is financially. They've got some cap space. They've got a little bit of wiggle room right now, but doesn't necessarily mean they're going to spend it. I think they're strategically looking at options. I believe David Savard will be one of those options that they look at, because I think they definitely want to bring in somebody with physicality and a defensive mind on that blue line. They're not going to get somebody like Matthias Ekholm, whom they brought in, the other year to kind of stabilize things on that back end, primarily because they don't have the assets to pull it off. They don't have a deep cupboard of draft picks right now that they can go out and start buying. So a guy like David Savard, $3.5 million cap hit. The Habs are going to get a lot of interest in him. He's back in the lineup tonight. And yeah, the Edmonton Oilers can take a quick look at him. I think he's going to be a target, and a player like him is going to be somebody that the Oilers would like to add between, I guess now, if they can find the right move, and the March 7th trade deadline.
All right, well, this is still very early in the season, but we're riding the wave. We're riding the roller coaster
Yeah.
with everyone. Obviously, a lot more chatter about trades after the GM meetings last week. I think there are a handful of teams that we could consider, really taking a look. Do they need a jolt? Something like Nashville and Buffalo? Are there GMs willing to listen on some of their players, like maybe in Anaheim? What do you think? Do you think ahead of U.S. Thanksgiving next week that we're going to have more action than we've seen in past years?
Well, there certainly seems to be a little bit more heightened discussion around this time of year going into U.S. Thanksgiving next Thursday, primarily because, as you mentioned, there are teams that are looking to make these types of moves out of necessity, it hasn't gone well in Nashville. And it was a nice win last night against Vancouver, but they've been looking for a second line center since training camp. You know, some of the other teams, Buffalo, thought they'd be in a better position than they are right now. Not the case, and they're looking around to see if they can make a hockey type trade, swap out talent for talent. They don't want to move out some of their primary guys in their young core, which may be a little tricky to make an impact type move, but they are looking around to see what's available. And I think because of the necessity for some of these teams to be more competitive than they are, they're being a little bit more aggressive, at least from a search perspective. You mentioned the Anaheim Ducks. They've got a lot of assets, some of whom, though, kind of, well, they're out of the lineup. They're hurt. Cam Fowler out a few weeks. Robbie Fabry had surgery. He's going to be out about 5-6 more weeks. So things are going to wait a little bit for some of these teams and some of the assets that are available. But teams are doing their due diligence. They're looking around. Columbus as well, exploring. Montreal exploring. Maybe it does get things going around that quarter mark around U.S. Thanksgiving going into December. It certainly spice things up.
Well, you mentioned Columbus. They're playing in Boston tonight, so that's one of the first games tonight. And as I mentioned, 6 games on tap. We're rolling through the season. We're early on, but a lot is happening. And so, thank you as always for your input here. And we'll keep all of the fans covered over the next week or so as we count down to U.S. Thanksgiving, and then we're on to Christmas.